worlds, the classes. What's on the horizon for John McPhee in 2025?
Yeah, man. I don't know. I had a good year.
That are the investigation and the Special Forces tab revocation of John McPhee.
And I don't give a that other people talk. The internet's full of village idiots, you know what I mean? They all have a voice and they're the loudest ones on the internet.
Put John McPhee in a case in glass that says break in case of war or violence, and you break that, he is one of the greatest war fighters to walk during GWOT.
People continue to go and defend him and be like, well, he was such a war hero. We broke him.
I mean, I think I'm a great role model.
The John McPhee situation.
Shrek has completely gone off the radar. He's on whatever will get him famous. That's all I know.
No one talks about that stuff. Look, my first day in war, December 2001, we killed 1,000 dudes. We killed so many people on my first day, I just stopped counting then and there, hundreds. It's too many to count.
For months, and we're involved in Tora Bora and, the John McPhee's of the world.
I was with 5 guys. You know how many people? I was with 3 guys. You know how many people we killed in the Battle of Tora Bora? Hundreds. I just stopped counting on my first day.
They couldn't find armed bodies to stack. John, stop it.
But other than that, I don't believe I'm on a pedestal. I don't believe I'm better than anybody.
With the John Shrek McPhee controversy coming to a head the last few weeks, there's been a lot of drama in the military creator space. There had always been questions regarding the validity of his claims in the past. But overall, since he was an experienced Delta Force operator, for the most part his stories were taken at face value. John had an amazing career where he did and experienced things that could be the source material for movies and video games. In the last 12 months, John's brain has exploded with him doing interviews with Joe Rogan, Shawn, and many others. With his upcoming book coming out soon, it looked like John's entrepreneur journey was going to continue to grow and expand. But in the last few months to a year, there had been more and more questions regarding his service claims. Well, fast forward to the end of August and beginning of September this year, the 2 largest channels in the Stolen Valor space would post their explosive videos invalidating John as an operator with a legendary career. Or did they? When Valhalla VFT and Antihero posted their videos, I was shocked at what they shared. Although John can be pretentious, the things he shared about his career and time in service was inspirational. But after watching the exposing videos, I did have a strange feeling that something might be off. Unfortunately, I found things I wish I didn't since I feel obligated to share them out of respect for the military community and the public's perception of us. I suspect this video is going to garner negative attention, especially because there's no winners from the events that have transpired. But at the end of the day, Stolen Valor is a serious topic that I care about that needs to be covered as unbiasedly as possible, especially when it's against a fellow service member. I'll save my opinions on the situation till the end. But for other service members that are in the public eye, I hope this becomes a learning experience. At the end of the day, there's a certain level of respect in the public's eye for veterans, so we need to be aware of bad actors and call them out, but it needs to be done as thorough and professional as possible to maintain that credibility in the public's eye, while also not prioritizing notoriety or monetary gains. Because at the end of the day, there's more civilians and veterans watching what's going on in the veteran space on YouTube, so the way we share things and hold each other accountable does matter. As always, there'll be timestamps below to mark specific chapters if you want to skip to a specific accusation. But without further ado, this is John Shrek McPhee versus the internet. Bottom line up front, I know this is going to be a very long video, and I'm sure not everyone wants to stay to watch all the evidence for and against him. So here's a quick summary of all the evidence that will be in this video. Has John lied or exaggerated points of his career? Absolutely. But the question should be, is his career more fact than fiction when it comes to the important pieces that distinguishes himself as an operator? It is more fact than fiction. Has John said things that would constitute stolen valor? Yes, but if we're being fair, they are instances that seem more along the lines of poorly thought statements. Not anything close to intentional branding like we saw with Tim Kennedy. Do I think John was targeted for his general demeanor? Yes, I think his don't care attitude, distasteful opinions about the global war on terrorism, while being associated with Tim Kennedy while garnering so much success, made this a matter of time before someone was going to call him out and try to platform him. But stay tuned for the evidence so you can see where these conclusions were derived from. To set the stage, we'll do a quick background on John's career in the military. He grew up in South Chicago, undergoing a rough childhood. During his adolescence, he would experience homelessness and abuse from his mother. While working as a diesel mechanic at 21, John would attempt to join the Air Force to become a mechanic but would not score high enough. He would then enlist in the Army as an infantryman with the option to go Ranger selection. John would make it through basic training and airborne school before heading to Ranger Battalion's RIP selection, where he ultimately passed and was selected to serve in the 1st Ranger Battalion. After about 7 years in the Rangers, John would go to attend Special Forces selection. Again, John would be selected and spend less than a year in Special Forces. In his own words, he didn't care for how formal Special Forces was back in the 90s. So when his friend that was in Delta Force told him to try out for Delta, also known as the Unit or CAG, he did and would spend the next decade there. John would deploy many times in his career to include Saudi Arabia, Haiti, Bosnia, 3 times to Iraq, and 3 times to Afghanistan. John has received many awards to include 4 Bronze Stars, 1 being for Valor, the Army Air Medal, 3 Meritorious Service Medals, with one of them being the Defense or Joint version, and several other Joint and Army Combination and Achievement Medals on top of his many service medals. John has also earned a Ranger and Special Forces tab during his career, a CIB, an EIB, Master Parachute Military Freefall Badge, Jump Master Badge with a Bronze Star, and the British and Australian Airborne badges. Aside from all of his formal awards, John's service is most notable for his time in Iraq and Afghanistan. In his 3 deployments to Iraq, he's mostly known for being Tim Kenny's boss on one of the SIF teams that was instrumental in the hunt for the terrorist Zarqawi. John also conducted Singleton missions in Iraq where he would transport and collect intel from various sources. John is also known for being part of the Battle of Tora Bora in Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden was almost defeated after 9/11. But his most notable experience comes from a Singleton mission that was conducted in Afghanistan after the Battle of Tora Bora. This mission in particular is where the majority of his controversy is derived from. Before we do our analysis on John's career, I do want to set the stage for some context for civilians and even other veterans. Delta Force, more formally known as CAG, Combat Applications Group, is the tip of the spear for the United States military. In the last few years, there have been several Tier 1 CAG operators that have shared their careers and affiliation to the unit on social media. But I distinctly remember 10 years ago, when I was in the Army and how secretive it still was. I only had ever met one person that tried out for the unit. He told me about the first few days of selection, that was it. The rest we had to guess from movies and video games what it was like. But as I was researching this video, I came across John's interview on Trigger Time from 2016.
I did my time on a team, and then I thought, like those unit guys, that would be pretty cool. So I decided to go to unit selection. Unit selection, again, its own unique animal.
I had completely forgotten about this interview where he described his journey into CAG. I distinctly remember this being the first time I was able to put a face to a Delta guy. But now I know John already had a YouTube channel that he created in 2013 and is already decently known. Although he's not the first publicly known unit member, he is a pioneer of representing the unit on social media. The unit is known for not allowing much to get out and being secretive. So John, for better or worse, set the mold for other Tier 1 operators to break the silence and give a glimpse behind the curtains of that role to this generation. On August 24, 2025, Valhalla VFT would post his video, The Dark Truth of John Shrek McPhee. It would go viral very quickly and is by far his most successful video on his channel. There are 2 general sections to this video. First, what he did in service. 2, what led to his service coming to an end. Let's be clear, if those memorandums are true, and John really did conduct those assault acts against his spouse, there's no excuse for it. 20 plus years of service, with the bulk being during times of war, and him experiencing what he did overseas, of course, is a factor. But it is not an excuse. If you want to know more, obviously go watch Nate's video. But the needed context is that Nate conducted a Freedom of Information request through USASOC and the Army HRC command for John's service records and received 200 documents. There are 3 major accusations against his career. 1, that he did not retire with his Special Forces tab and it was revoked. 2, that he did not retire as an E9 Sergeant Major and was in fact a retired E8 Master Sergeant. Lastly, he lied about conducting a combat jump into Iraq. In context of John's Stolen Valor story and what we'll dissect against other sources, the accusations in this video I feel are much less contestable than the others that will be shared in Antihero. But we are starting here since it's more cut and dry. Let's start with the Special Forces tab revocation. Nate shows several documents that display, due to John's actions at the end of his career, that his Special Forces tab was revoked along with his security clearance.
All right, next document you'll see here, memorandum from the commander. As you can see, recommendation for termination of CMF 18 status, being a Green Beret, and the Special Forces tab of Sergeant Major John McPhee. It says here, I have reviewed the file, including a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand today, which I directed and filed in Sergeant Major McPhee's OMPF, and recommend you initiate administrative procedures to terminate Sergeant Major McPhee's current MOS, being a Green Beret, and revoke his Special Forces tab. Sergeant Major John McPhee's serious misconduct while assigned to United States Special Operations Command reflects a deficiency in the professional judgment and personal integrity, calling into question his ability to adhere to the personal and professional standards required of a Special Forces sergeant. So as you see here, SWC's revocation of your Special Forces tab, also the MOS change to 11 Zulu, so revocation of the Green Berets, well, suspension of your special pays, suspension of your security clearance, and 30 days to find an assignment at Fort Bragg.
Obviously, of Nate exiting the military as a Special Forces qualified soldier, this is a topic he is sensitive about and does not like that John is representing himself as a fellow Special Forces regiment member.
I think it's time for some honesty, and it's time to stop representing yourself as part of our community, which you are most certainly not.
I know people won't like this point, but if we are being objective in the sense of what qualifies for stolen valor, while I watched over 100 videos with John in it, I never saw him claim to represent himself as a retired Special Forces soldier. On the contrary, he did not enjoy his time in Special Forces, and he has stated that very consistently over the years.
I know of.
I do believe John almost comparing Special Forces to the conventional army and being so far beneath Delta is a big reason why fellow Green Beret qualified operators such as Nate and Brent didn't care for him initially. But the reasons he gave made sense why he was so briefly in Special Forces. Again, he has very consistently shared that it was less than a year between his time in Ranger Regiment and being part of the unit. There have been a few times where he has shown his uniform with his SF tab still attached, or him posting a picture of it in his background. But if I'm being unbiased, I don't feel that he represented himself as...
Interesting, because what I have here is John's service record sent to me directly by U.S. Army Human Resources Command as coordinated through USASOC. And according to the U.S. Army, John is a retired master sergeant. That is an E8. That is a very different rank than a sergeant major.
In regards to the E8 versus E9 argument, I kind of chuckled at this. When I did my video on Tim Walz doing the exact same thing, it seemed like the general sentiment on the internet was that it doesn't matter since he served in the position. Well, a big difference for John is that during interviews, the interviewer always introduced him as Sergeant Major, and he would say that he served as one, but never that he retired as one. This did stand out when I was watching videos of him talking about retirement, but out of all the videos I watched to research this video, I did find one video where he did explicitly say that he was a retired sergeant major.
Extra mag. If I got a chance to go out with like dudes right now somewhere, like they're like, yeah, come on, retired old sergeant major, come tag along.
Again, I do believe it's a mixture of him talking about his service, and when people assume that he got out as a sergeant major, he doesn't correct them. But that one slip up does constitute as an action that falls under stolen valor. I'm going to save the combat jump into Iraq since it overlaps with Antihero's episode on John. While Nate's video would get a mixed reaction from the internet, many would condemn John, then others would be critical of Nate and defend John. Also, there are those that felt it was something that should have stayed out of the public space. There would be two other military influencers that would go head-to-head with Nate's claims against John. First was Clay Martin. Clay would post a video on his X account on September 1st, a little over a week later, calling out Valhalla VFT. His video isn't very YouTube friendly, so I'll summarize the gist and link it below. Also for context, Clay is a retired Special Forces soldier. In essence, Clay explains how he and John were in Iraq at the same time, and that Nate had no idea what the war was like and wasn't even in the army during the height of it. Clay doesn't condone the assault allegations, but also defends John for what he has seen and what had happened to him during the beginning stages of the war. He also acknowledges that even though he may have had his tab pulled and may have been demoted at the end, he still earned his stripes and tab to be able to claim it. Nate and Clay would have a pretty petty back and forth after this for a while, but that's not relevant to John. The second influencer that is an important piece of the story is NickyMGTV. Before the John McPhee allegations came out, Nate and Nick both had their back and forth on the internet and obviously are not fans of each other. On September 2nd, a week after Valhalla's video, NickyMGTV would post his video, Valhalla VFT destroyed over John McPhee video, Green Beret equals high school drama. Nick would share Clay's earlier points and agree that even though he had his SF tab revoked and was demoted, he still served in that capacity, so it's not relevant. We will come back to Nick in context to Nate's coverage of John. My reaction to Nate's video was disappointment towards John for the assault charges. but I did not like the way Nate presented his information. Nate, at the end of his video, shared that there's much more he has on John.
So I think it's time for some honesty, and it's time to stop representing yourself as part of our community, which you are most certainly not. You guys think I'm just trying to go after this guy? I can assure you there are 200 more pages of this. Far, far more embarrassing than what I've showed you. And I'm hoping I don't need to release any more of this. I'm hoping this is enough. Or I may have to public forum and release every single one of these documents to the public in a Google Drive. I'll just have to wait and see. That's not going to be up to me. So again, I'm sorry to, all of his fans and supporters. I get it. There's going to be a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes in learning something like this.
This diminished my perception of Nate trying to do the right thing. I don't know what outcome he was looking for, but felt like he was threatening John to leave the internet or he would drop more personal files on him. But if Nate was really prioritizing the truth, then why not share everything the public would need to make a fully informed decision on John? While following the mixed reaction in Nate's video, he would go on a live stream and claim he has more Valor awards than John.
You realize, and I just showed this, I did a whole live stream showing my DD214, all my awards on this last stream, because obviously I've exposed Tim Kennedy, I exposed John McPhee. You do realize I have more Valor and Combat awards than John McPhee and Tim Kennedy combined, right? And I don't brag about it. I'm not telling war stories. My point is,
Nate would catch some heat for this. First, because it was an odd way to try to use Valor awards, almost as a way to validate himself against others. John has been awarded the Bronze Star for Valor, and Nate has an Army Combination Medal for Valor. Nate also does have a Combination Medal for Combat and an Army Achievement Medal for Combat, but those are not Valor awards. I think this is a very dumb pissing match to have, especially since Valor awards are a big deal. But to be completely objective, any honest veteran knows that medals can be very subjective. People do perform acts and conduct themselves above expectations and don't get formally recognized with a medal, and service members sometimes lie or fudge facts to get recognized. But I do know that this is an important piece for some. So the easiest way I think I can explain it is with a metaphor I know people probably won't like, but here it is. All medals and awards have a hierarchy like degrees. Medals like the Medal of Honor or Service Crosses are PhDs. Must be earned, and you can't really earn them through cheating. Valor awards are master's degrees. Yes, some fall through the cracks and may not have been earned, but for the most part, the work has to be put in to get it. Bachelor's degrees are medals awarded with a C device for combat. A specific criteria is needed to earn them. And normal awards, just like mine, in reality should be earned, but there is no consistency or continuity for the requirements. But obviously, different degrees are objectively harder. Going back to John's Bronze Star for Valor, it is objectively higher than Nate's Army Combination Medal. It doesn't necessarily mean the actions are more or less than others, but the formal recognition process does have a hierarchy. But again, medals, especially for Valor, are significant, but they are by no means in this context a validation tool. Nate was catching some heat for these takes and decided to remove himself from the fight.
So, you may have noticed a lot of channels attacking me and attacking Brent Tucker after the John McPhee episodes we did. I get it, it's the internet, some people are upset. But, I kind of lowered myself to the level, clapped back, responded, which I shouldn't do because I'm essentially, and I know what they want, is I'm essentially building their brand notoriety off of my channel, my story, and we're not going to do that anymore. So, we're going right back to comedy, good times, positivity. People want to talk shit, they can talk shit. It's fine. It's the internet. No big deal. No harm, no foul. Moving on.
But the intent and criticism would return when NickyMGTV would post his video. Valhalla VFT claims 200 files exposing John McPhee. No one can find them on September 21st. NickyMGTV would also submit a FOIA request like Valhalla VFT to see what Nate was holding on to about John. But Nicky would receive an interesting response from the Army.
I'll take whatever you guys can get me because I just wanted to see any of these 200 pages. Now, what's crazy about that is I was not able to obtain even a single page of what Nate has here. And I requested the exact same forms that he requested. That's because they wrote me back this letter pretty much denying it. But there's more information within between the lines I want you to see here. They say that, Dear Nick, this is a letter in response to your request for information under FOIA, dated September 3rd, 2024, requesting a copy of all adverse actions pertaining to Sergeant Major John R. McPhee for the period of 2006 through 2011. Your request was received in this office on September 8th, 2025, and was processed under the provisions of FOIA and Privacy Acts. We have assigned control number this to your request for our administrative and tracking purposes. Please refer to this number when inquiring about your request. And it says, as a matter of policy and to protect the privacy interests of its personnel, the Department of Army does not confirm or deny the existence of misconduct records that would be responsive to your request. In addition, third-party misconduct records, when they do exist, are exempt from the mandatory release under the Privacy Act of 1974. It says this letter and with the withholdings above constitute a denial of your request made on behalf of General Hope C. Rampey, Commander, U.S. Army Human Resources Command, the initial denial authority for AHRC records requested under FOIA. So with that, would you say that Nate somehow got these from some background information from somebody else, some other source that might have been biased, that might have been using Nate to try and portray something in a bad light? Maybe.
So now there are two questions. One, did Nate fabricate the documents? Or two, does Nate have a connection that shared documents that aren't part of the formal file for John? One thing that Nick did notice, which is interesting, is the Army representative did refer to John as Sergeant Major.
U.S. Army Human Resources Command. But let's go back to my letter about this, where I'm very intrigued because there are some things that are not lining up here. Go back to my letter, the first paragraph, I said I was requesting a copy pertaining to Sergeant Major John R. McPhee. Okay. Now, they also refer to him in this entire letter as Sergeant Major John McPhee. I just have to say, that's really weird. I don't think Nate made this up either, but is there something going wrong in the background of the records, official records of the Army?
Here's what I think we should focus on in context to decide if John is the soldier he represents himself as. John's brand is not one of a Sergeant Major or Green Beret. He is known for being a CAG operator that comes from a rough life and thrived in the chaos of war and did things few people have. So it is unfortunate that we don't have clarity about his final years in the military, and I think those who he inspires deserves a response. But I doubt he will, and I don't think the accusations are what his audience cares about.
So yeah, people try to drag me into internet all the time, like, well, if you just would comment, other people would shut up. I'm not commenting. I don't give a that other people talk. The internet's full of village idiots, you know what I mean? They all have a voice and they're the loudest ones on the internet. It's your fault for even looking.
A week after Valhalla VFT posted his video on John, the Antihero Podcast would post their own video called Episode 140, Barney Fife of Baghdad. Really quick, since I didn't know who Barney Fife was until researching this video, he is a character from the Andy Griffith Show that's from the 60s. He's a satirical representation of an incompetent police officer that doesn't know what he's doing. The first point that Brent would go over, who is a fellow Delta operator that is also Special Forces qualified, is what Valhalla VFT brought up in his video.
Did you do any deployment trips in that 18 months?
Let's see. Oh, we jumped in Iraq in like 90 or whatever it was. I broke my leg,
Shit.
Landed in a minefield, had a walk with broken bones, and then yeah.
All right, so before you went to Ranger School, you guys jumped into Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
John says there in Mike Ritland's podcast, I believe that was less than a week ago, that he jumped into Iraq during Desert Storm in 1990 into an Iraqi minefield. That's an insane story. But I said we were going to come back to his service records real quick. Let's take a look at those. Now, when I look at these service records, the first thing I notice is John didn't join the military until January of 1991. How did you jump into an Iraqi minefield in 1990 when you weren't even in the military? But let's say he forgot when he joined the military.
The lies start early. He did not jump into Iraq with the 175th. It's pretty easy to tell. Anyone with Google can find this out because the Rangers didn't jump into Iraq in 1991. He's talking about an operation called Irish Gold. Irish Gold was the code name for an airborne assault conducted by the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment in Kuwait in December 1991. Now, I know it's just another country away. What's the big deal? Except, I don't know, jumping into Iraq is an actual combat mission where death is on the line, and jumping into Kuwait, into an allied friendly country to do a live fire exercise is drastically different.
Very different.
So somehow John conflated his deployment to Kuwait with a combat jump to Iraq, which does seem like a very strange thing to lie about. Operation Iris Gold, in summary, was a 1991 emergency deployment to Kuwait after the Persian Gulf War to show the U.S. commitment to the region. The deployment involved an extensive overland movement and a live fire exercise, demonstrating U.S. resolve and setting the stage for future annual exercises in the area. The first time I could find where John shared his story was on a channel called Combat Story from 2021. Unfortunately, the original video has been privated, along with the majority of other videos with John when the allegations came out. But thankfully, I found an archived version of this episode where John shares his story extensively.
So if we go to December of 91, I think you said it was, right, John? Yeah. Is this, you guys are going into Desert Storm? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so we jumped in. I still don't know the details because I was just a private Ranger battalion, you know what I mean? But we jumped in combat jump, or so you think. And I'm going to tell you this, the plane was really low. So yeah, we jumped into some airfield in Iraq.
Can you just take me through, like, what was it like? This is your first experience. I mean, not many people have done a combat jump, certainly at that time. And then even later on, there just aren't many static line jumps, right? I mean, what was going through your head as this 21, 22-year-old?
So first off, we jumped all the fucking time in Ranger Battalion. All the time. And it was always a fucking shit show. We barely hit the drop zone most nights. Look, I'm just being honest. You know what I mean?
I love it.
Flew from Savannah in-flight rig to jump in.
Come on, what's that flight time? How long?
I don't know. A day? You know what I mean? I wouldn't even use hours for this. I'd be like, we'll be there tomorrow or sometime.
All rigged up?
Well, you rig up like an hour out. You start rigging up.
Jeez.
Doors open. Who was it? Colonel Grange was on my bird. David L. Grange. And so he Jumpmaster gives the winds, and it's like, winds. And the guy's like, and you're like, well, that wasn't like one or two fingers. You know what I mean? Like, the guy was flashing, right? Well,
is that wind speed? Is that wind speed, John? Okay.
Yeah, 30 knots. So he did 10 3 times. But he did it really fast. And Grange comes up, talks to him. We race track. And then finally, Grange is talking to him after a couple race tracks, And then the guy's like, wind, 0. And you're like, I've been lied to before. You know what I mean? Like, just tell me you're going to lie to me. I'll accept it better. Like, so 30 knot winds, man. I went out, my parachute open, but I stayed parallel to the ground the whole time. I lowered my backpack hung up. I didn't even make the airfield. Like, I landed in a blown up building that was rubble and rebar. My backpack caught the rubble and rebar, right? Which kind of made a pendulum and slammed me into the more rebar. I broke the front bone in my leg, or one of the bones in my leg. It's a compound fracture. I can patch myself up, like, and then when I got out of the rubble pile, I was in a minefield, and I had to cross the minefield. Luckily, you can see them. I had to cross the minefield, jump a fence to get to the first aid point.
Does this story sound exaggerated? Yes. But the question is whether he lied about doing a combat jump in Iraq. It looks like he did lie. There are no listings of combat jumps into Iraq from Ranger Regiment the whole time John was there. But going back to Valhalla's email from the Army, it does list John having a Bronze Star in his airborne wings, which means he did conduct a combat jump at some point. But it wasn't with the Rangers into Iraq. The next point from Antihero is John telling stories about him and other Delta operators calling an ordinance during the Battle of Tora Bora.
Yep. He insinuates this was like me and a couple other guys get there. He's going to talk about here in a little bit, like all the killing that they do, and dropping bombs is killing, but he just usually when someone's this look at me guy, they just negate the other people that were around.
Yeah.
Most of these guys took over positions from 5th Group.
Okay.
5th Group was already there. 5th Group is dropping bombs. You didn't control every asset in the hemisphere. There was still a war going on throughout the whole country, and there were plenty of bombs getting dropped. And then he says, me and a couple other guys. There were several teams throughout throughout the region, and you didn't drop anything, John. You had something called controllers and TACPs. Drop things. So which you are none of.
At this point in the video, I'm going to share a very important piece of evidence that I'll be going over throughout the rest of the video. There is a book called Kill Bin Laden that was written by the commanding Delta Forces operator from the Battle of Tora Bora. The author's name is Dalton Fury, but it has been released that the operator's actual name is Tom Greer. Unfortunately, Tom passed away in 2016 at the age of 52 from cancer, but from all accounts, he was a respected Delta Force operator. Since the majority of the accusations against John that revolve around his embellishments are from his time in Afghanistan, I thought it'd be a good idea to read the book. Well, I have to say the book created more questions than answers. But let's hear some thoughts about the book before we use it as a backstop for this video.
Kill Bin Laden, the Dalton Fury book. That book, if people haven't read it, is a very big eye opener to how we kind of switch gears into how we fought.
Back then, it was that guy Dalton Fury, right? The guy who wrote Kill Bin Laden was my commander.
I read this book because people were like, oh, he's mentioned as doing this solo mission in the book. And so the guy who wrote this book, Dalton Fisher was his, Dalton Fury was his pseudonym. So it's not his real name. And he ended up dying of cancer, I believe, but he's no longer with us. And I read that book, and it was a good book. And so since it was in that book, and nothing else in that book was really, over-exaggerated or lied about, and you can tell, as always, the way this guy wrote the book, he wrote it to tell the story of the boys. He told it to do a lessons learned of what happened.
So it seems like we can agree that the book was written for the right reasons, so we can trust its contents. But we'll be referencing this book a lot moving forward. But there is a video reading of it available on YouTube for the first few chapters that I will link below. But let's see what the book says about airstrikes. Throughout the night, 2 Delta Force snipers and 1 British commando would work fire mission after fire mission, directing airstrikes on known and suspected positions, while the other 3 Brits protected their teammates from any unannounced enemy appearances. A savvy reader might notice here, Pope didn't have a qualified ground forces air controller on his team. Pope recognized his potential liability a very long time ago. As a Delta team leader, he enjoyed great liberty as to what skills he wanted his men to learn or to sustain during their training at home. Needless to say, Pope wasn't too popular for that, at least until they found themselves in a place called Tora Bora. Pope himself, Loblo, Jester, and Dugan were as valuable as any Air Force Special Tactics combat controller available. Scrawny looked back at the spot where the RPG gunner had appeared, looked back at his map, and then checked his compass needle. He didn't have a laser finder or laser marker with him, but he didn't need one. Scrawny estimated the target coordinates using good old-fashioned terrain association and commando know-how and passed the numbers to Shrek. Within a few minutes, the first bomb slammed in the enemy position, a direct hit that sent debris whizzing around the snipers' heads. So there are members of the Delta team that have been trained in calling in airstrikes, and there's a specific mention of Shrek doing so. The amount of bombs that were dropped was staggering during the Battle of Tora Bora. An enormous amount of U.S. taxpayer money and factory worker effort was expended at Tora Bora. Over 1,100 precision-guided bombs and more than 550 dumb bombs were dropped during the assault on Al-Qaeda's hideout. In one single and quiet but busy 24-hour period alone, 135 JDAMs were dropped. These totals do not include shells put through the deadly accurate 40mm chain gun and 105mm cannons of the AC-130 gunships. These would have numbered in many thousands. A rule was established early on that no aircraft was to fly all the way to Tora Bora and then return to its base with bombs still hung. A daily average of over 100 bombs impacted inside the EZs. 100 bombs a day, and planes weren't allowed to return with ordnance. So yes, is John puffing his chest out a little too much? Yeah, it sounds like it. But from the book, it looks like Delta was controlling the ordnance, and there was actual operators calling airstrikes to include John. The next point is John supposedly engaging enemies with a 50 cal.
Talk about a gun that shows up in Tim's stories, the Shy-Tac 408.
Yeah.
Now he's got a McMillan 50 cal at 2,500 yards. Here's like just like then. No one knows that he has this gun. Again, we already covered. I'm glad that it is in the Shawn Ryan show, so we can cover it. I get confused a little bit. I've watched, unfortunately, all of his podcasts. I get a little bit confused which one he tells his stories in. So he does tell it in the Shawn Ryan podcast. And I kind of already covered it. Every guy I talked to about this is like, no, absolutely not. Like I said, I wasn't there. I can only ask all your teammates. And you're talking about other guys there saying, we did this. They never shot back. That's a great story, but unfortunately, it is unverified. Unverified
at best.
At best.
There is a very specific quote from the book that addresses this. Throughout the Tora Bora operations, no Delta operator killed anyone in any way other than dropping bombs on their heads. Yes, the argument can be made that it's possible that the commander might not have known about an engagement that John made, but being objective, with such a specific quote, it seems like this is a lie. However, what Brent said about enemies being out of range of direct engagement during the entirety of Tora Bora is inaccurate as well.
Because they didn't see it. And in fact, they said there was so little, like, almost non-existent, like, fighting going on, and it was so hard to get up into some of those positions. One guy's quoted as saying, "If I could have thrown my SR-25 rifle down the mountain, I would have. It was heavy and it was useless to me," because they were outside of small arms fire.
Yeah,
which is what you do, not just small arms. I mean, big arms. You're outside of enemy fire. 100 yards. They were never 400 yards within the enemy. They were 1,500 yards to 1,500 kilometers to 2 clicks the whole time.
Yeah. After about an hour of squeezing to awkward positions, they heard the unmistakable sounds of weapons rattling and heavy, fast-paced footsteps approaching. The snipers froze in place and held their breaths, with thumbs on their selector switches of their rifles. Shrek slipped a grenade from his vest and held it close to his chest. As soon as the footsteps faded, Scrawny whispered, 5 or 6 Al-Qaeda, no doubt. So there are points where John, aka Shrek, was so close to enemies, a grenade would have done the trick. Here we'll introduce another Delta Force operator named Jamie Caldwell that served with Shrek during the Battle of Tora Bora that is also on social media. He also shared a sticky situation while in Tora Bora.
Bit linked up with a couple of guides that were going to sort of take us up through some of the mountain paths and trails and get us to UBL. But it was a little hairy getting in there and some of the other adventures that we had as we were moving through the mountain range and getting RPG'd and getting mortared and getting shot at by Bishka. I mean, it was, there were some hairy times. I'm kind of surprised we got through it as well as we did.
So it definitely wasn't as passive, almost hands-off as was being inferred from Antihero. This isn't a stolen valor or exaggeration claim, but the comments John made about incoming outgoing mortar fire was interesting.
We were in the Tora Bora Mountains, the Battle of Tora Bora, kind of famous battles today's day and age. But we get up to the top of the mountains on that first day, and there is just rounds going off, explosions, dust everywhere, kind of chaotic. Couldn't really tell who was doing what, where, and why. And we were on the top of the mountain. I was with another guy. The other guy I was with was a Panama vet. I was like, well, he's seen combat before, and then there's explosions and people are running behind us. And so I was just kind of curious, like, is this incoming fire or outgoing fire? Like, I'm not sure what's going on here. It's like, it's all going off and we get outside of the truck. I'm on the top of this ridgeline and I'm kind of looking over the battlefield, right? And I'm like, this is amazing, And I was just standing there. So like, there's so much shit going off. Like, as a new guy, I kind of couldn't tell at the time, or as a mid-level guy with no combat. And I asked another guy I was with, he was on the Panama raid. He was the guy that fired the machine gun into the barracks that like dropped all the dudes in the barracks. And so I look over at him. I'm like, hey, is this incoming or outgoing? He was like, I don't fucking know. And I was like, so I was just standing.
This is the type of stuff that kills me. And civilians are just eaten up. They love this guy. They think he's some sort of war hero. Did you see what he just said?
Well, it sounds like I've been around them, and I've never really been around them going in combat, but I've been around them coming, and they don't sound the same.
Well, that's because apparently you have more experience than the greatest warfighter of our generation.
Yeah, even a slick sleeve soldier like myself and probably the majority of civilians could discern what the difference is between incoming and outgoing mortar fire. I think the story started as a joke, but as the years went by, it became more of a serious story to try to convey the amount of fire missions and overall temperature was during the battle. But I get why it annoys other operators like Brent. Another point that isn't stolen valor that got brought up is the Kill Bin Laden comments.
But he's Tim Kennedy Sr., so what do you expect?
What? I feel like we're just glossing over the whole like killing Bin Laden, man. Was that just like a general like just kidding? But I was in Afghanistan, or
he can't help himself. It has to be bigger, better. It has to be big. I was there killing Bin Laden.
Anybody tell Rob about this?
No, you weren't. It was.
We found him.
We found him. Yeah, I guess John doesn't know. We found him, and you didn't kill him. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but all right, go ahead. See what else he's got, Drew.
Honestly, I didn't know anything about the Battle of Tora Bora before all this controversy came out. But to be clear, yes, John is correct. The reason that they were there was to kill Bin Laden right after 9/11, and they almost got him in those mountains. If you're all interested in the history of the War on Terror, I do suggest you read this book, since it captures a critical mistake made by military leadership at the time that they allowed UBL to escape. But this point is important since for some reason Brent didn't clarify that was the mission Tora Bora to Tyler. The next point that's kind of strange to try to quantify is the amount of enemies killed during the Battle of Tora Bora.
No one talks about that stuff. Like, look, my first day in war, December 2001, we killed 1,000 dudes. Like, can I count that? Should I have counted? Like, how do you count?
The times I was with 5 guys, you know how many people, I was with 3 guys, you know how many people we killed in the Battle of Tora Bora? Fucking hundreds. I just stopped counting on my first day.
And we killed a lot of people. We killed so many people on my fucking first day, I just stopped counting then and there, hundreds. It's too many to count.
Here's what we can piece together for how many enemies were eliminated. The news was not good. Gus said the intelligence community was estimating that there are between 1,500 to 3,000 enemy forces were currently inside the Tora Bora Mountains. I changed the subject. When we arrived, we were told that there are up to 3,000 enemy fighters were in the mountains. Where did they go and how many were killed? We found 80 of them in the valley yesterday from bombs. As best as we could figure, the actual number of dead Al-Qaeda came to 220. Another 52 Al-Qaeda fighters had been captured, most of them Arabs and about a dozen Afghans. There is no doubt the real number of killed and captured enemy fighters is much higher. No one will ever know for sure, and it is not really all that important. We had taken Tora Bora, which the Soviets had failed to do in 10 years of savage fighting.
It was elaborate.
How deep would you say, the main cave or some of the bigger caves were that you went into? Could they have been cleared with thermobarics, or did you have to go into them?
Yeah. Oh yeah, easily. Yep. Yeah, they weren't very big or very deep at all. Yeah, from the ones that we saw. Yeah.
With hundreds of bombs dropped a day and an estimated 1,500 to 3,000 fighters in the mountains, and the caves being so shallow, it's not hard to believe that the number that were killed during the Battle of Tora Bora is in the thousands. Yes, Shawn exaggerates about the specifics, but there's no way to confirm it. There are other claims we can go over, but I think the most important one is the logistics about John's solo mission in Afghanistan.
You did a solo op in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Did you volunteer for this?
Well, yeah, but all right, hold on. Yes, I volunteered, but what I didn't know is other guys had turned it down. I didn't know I could turn it down. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I got to go do this. I'm in the Army. I do what you tell me. Okay, let me figure this out, right? I had to go from Jalalabad into the Tora Bora Mountains. So that's a 2 or 3 day drive, taking public transportation and kind of hitchhiking after.
You weren't dropped in by covertly?
Fuck no, man. I was in a taxi and then I found a logging truck and I just, yeah.
How the f*** you get away with this?
I didn't talk.
The guy's cover is a retard. The guy says, I hopped from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle and miraculously showed up on target. Are you guys listening to this? Are you finally starting to get it and be like, oh, hold on. Maybe this guy's a liar. Maybe this guy isn't the greatest war fighter of our generation.
So what Brent is saying is obviously very different from John's claims. Let's see what we can pull from the book. The first order of business was to locate Ahmed's bedroom, and one of the best reconnaissance operators in the business volunteered for the job. He is known at Delta as Shrek. He had been decorated for valor while chasing Bin Laden through the mountains almost a year earlier. In my opinion, there is no better man for the job. I wanted to give Shrek that warm and fuzzy confirmation. He might be working alone, but he was Delta, part of the team. Shrek looked at me sideways with those piercing eyes almost hidden behind all that thick hair. He looked scary. He carefully placed his prized H&K rifle under his sleeping bag to protect it from horrendous fine dust that inevitably covered everything. Dalton, I'm only leaving for a few days. Shrek was happy. I wondered if we'd ever see him again. But now, as an American commando on a Singleton mission, his truck seemed like heaven compared to the bus and how far away it was. He didn't dare speak to other passengers since he was trying to pass as an Afghan. When the jitney crossed tribal lines, he had to contend with armed checkpoint guards who were hungry for whatever booty for passengers they could draw from any unsuspecting and unprotected strangers on the little bus. The rest of us sat back at the airbase to plan the hit, and we would spend days reviewing possible courses of action. So first, it seems clear that this was a Singleton mission and that he was gone for several days on his own. Again, I really encourage you to read the book or at least listen to the partial amount that is on YouTube. Another clip that I think describes the terrain well is from Jamie.
Backs up mountains, and you're driving on roads that were barely wide enough for that Toyota, and now you're splitting the road with this big old Jenga truck that's coming the other direction. I mean, and you could see, you look over the edge of the mountain and you could see other trucks that, you know, had fallen off the mountain, and you know, I mean, it was hairy just getting there.
So riding around in a public bus from the late 80s in Afghanistan, I imagine wasn't a quick and optimal route. Brent does bring up good points about the environment and situation.
John doesn't speak the language. He's going from buses to taxis, hitchhiking. He doesn't speak the language. According to him, he's out here all by his lonesome. Okay, we're in a little place called Longwood.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna tell you can't speak. All right. I'm gonna tell you can't speak, and I'm gonna tell you to go grab a bus, grab a taxi, and just hitchhike. And see if you could get to Tampa. You think without talking,
without writing,
without talking, without, and the only thing you could do that is even better. The only thing you could do is act like a retard. and to make this mission possible, you have to end up not in Tampa, in the exact house that I give you an address with in Tampa. You think you can do it
with no GPS?
No GPS.
Yeah.
You can't ask. You can't ask. You can't show them the GPS. You think these Afghan taxi drivers know GPS? The guy can't talk the language.
Yeah.
The guy's cover is a retard. The guy says, I hop from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle and miraculously showed up on target.
I'd never been to a third world country, but I have lots of friends who have immigrated from them. So when Shrek explained in this way, it did make a little more sense.
I'd stay in strangers' houses. I do the Muslim rite of, if I'm here, you gotta feed me and protect me.
Did you have the language capability, John?
I just never said ever. Never make a noise. And the times I was forced to speak, I'd do like this over loud mongoloid voice, so they thought I was retarded. Work like a champ, I'm telling you.
But you're serious, aren't you? Like to act like you were...
I'm
like
serious.
You had a problem, right? Yeah.
I did it all the time. Yeah, because in Iraq and Afghanistan, in these war zones, you know, your mentally challenged uncle, you know, well, here in the United States, he's in a hospital, but in Afghanistan, what are you going to do with him?
And you didn't look like an American? I mean, you just had the beard and...
I used to have a big red beard, so I kind of blended in pretty well. I mean, look at me. I could blend in now also, but blending in is part clothing, part attitude, part look. You know what I mean? So there's a lot more, you know, and oh, by the way, in Afghanistan and Iraq, because of, what is it, colonial, whatever, the Brits ran, Afghanistan for 200 years, and then the Russians had it. So if you think there's guys that don't look like me there, you're crazy, because there's been guys like me there having babies for generations, right? So that's the same in Iraq.
Bottom line is, do I think the story's exaggerated? Absolutely. But do I think there's more truth from what John said versus Brent? Again, being objective, the only source we can go from is the book, and the book supports more of Shrek's side. The biggest piece from the Antihero podcast that shocked me was a claim that Shrek was with Afghan special forces during his reconnaissance.
So let me back this up and tell you exactly what it was. It wasn't a Singleton mission. He did it with Afghan special operations people.
Who would know?
Who could speak the language, who were there to help him, fight with him, could get him all the way, using their vehicle to get all the way there. Now that makes sense, doesn't it?
But there is no mention of this at all in the book. What the book says is this. The first 2 checkpoints were expected to be relatively benign. Just several militant men and tribal thugs shaking down commuters for whatever tolls they can get. Shrek and Ski had come up with some ingenious plan to get through the 3rd roadblock, which was more complex. A small sedan would travel with us but stay far enough away from our convoy to keep the signature low. In the car would be 4 Afghan military men who were on the payroll of the CIA and had been trained by Green Berets. Once the trucks were 2,000 meters short of the roadblock, the sedan would speed around us to the checkpoint. The militant men would jump out from the car with their guns raised and demand the guards to drop their weapons or else. So having a team of Afghans that were trained by SF on the way ahead of the convoy is extremely different than what Brent said about John being with them during the reconnaissance phase. I don't think that would have been left out of the book since so many other sensitive pieces of information were shared in the book. So overall for Shrek's Singleton mission, which if we're being honest is the most distinguishing part of his career, and we have to say whether or not there's more truth than lies, I think there's more fact than fiction. When I heard John talk about a Singleton mission, the thing that made me question it the most was the T story. The thought of a soldier carrying around and recreationally using speed did seem rather strange to me, but to my disbelief in the book, Dalton talks about using speed to stay awake. I tried to catch some rack time, but the double dose of speed that I'd popped during the long drive was still screwing with my system. The next point I want to cover is guys arguing in
You know what else wouldn't happen? 2 tier 1 unit guys not knowing who's in charge on top of a mountain. That's insane. I won't give out the secrets, but it doesn't take, even calling it a secret, but I try to say as little as possible. It's a little tough to some degree. There's some things I want to tell, to be like, let me tell you why that would never happen. I don't want to, I'm still in good standing with the unit. Yeah. I'm trying to stay that way, even though John is not. Okay? So, I have to debunk this while saying enough to debunk it and not saying, too much. But the guys on a team know exactly who's in charge. Yeah. It's a very, very simple formula. They know exactly who's in charge.
Is this the most important thing in the grand scheme of things? Not really. But there's another point that ties into this one since Brent mentioned the PNG thing. But first, Jamie explained the rank structure in an interview for Delta.
And that place is unique because it's all about time there. Like rank is immaterial. You don't wear it. It doesn't mean anything. And I've had as an E8 team leader, I remember I had an E9 on my team, but I was a team leader. He was a 3 IC, and that's the way it was. It didn't matter that I was an 8, he was a 9, or something like that. Guys that are troop sergeant majors will tell you though that the best job there is team leader, because once you become a troop sergeant major, you're not doing a lot anymore. I mean, you're there, you're on target, but all the teams and team leaders and everybody are going in, and you're coming in after them.
So rank doesn't matter, but position does. This concept isn't unique to CAG. Even in my unit, we had team leaders that were PFCs over specialists, and there would sometimes be conflict. So it isn't the hardest thing to imagine. It might happen from time to time in those higher levels. But the thing I want to tie this to is a PNG concept, persona non grata, being excommunicated by Delta for talking about it.
That wasn't your mission. You're not going to get PNG'd from your command talking about another mission.
What's PNG?
Persona non grata. It means you are no longer allowed to come back to the command. You can't step foot on the command. And once a year, they have people, come back, and there's certain occasions that people can come back to the command. Even if you spent 10, 15, 20 years there, you just can't go back to the command and hang out with the boys like you can kind of as a police officer. It's it's a top secret unit. You're not going anywhere. But this one time, or these few times you can, people relish that. And to have that pulled from you, and if you talk, it means a lot to people. And
before, we'd hit targets before, in various ways that I won't say, because like I said, unlike Shrek, I'm trying not to be PNG'd.
Shrek has stated that he doesn't care about this.
And I'm always, unlike some guys, I never felt like my identity was the unit. Like, and you know, guys like this, their life, if this wasn't their life, they'd have nothing. And then, you know, now that I'm retired, like, you know, they still have dinners or functions. I call it the prom. You got to dress up and you go to dinner and you meet the guys and that, and they do that stuff. And one of the guys who worked for me, I was his boss. He's now one of the head sergeant majors, and he's always trying to get me to come back out there to, you know, meet the guys and stuff. And it's kind of weird because I felt like it's a train and it's going fast. And one day it stops and you get on, and one day it's going to stop and you're going to get off. And as soon as you get off, you're going to look back at the train. It's going to be so far away, you don't even know where it went, right? So I always felt like a lot of guys say this is lead, follow, get the fuck out of the way.
Tom also talked about it in his book. Some of these brave men may question this writing as a breach of my personal integrity. Going into the book, I expect to be vilified and scratched from the invite list for events involving former unit members. That happened. I have been tagged persona non grata, PNG'd, we call it, by Delta Higher Headquarters, the Joint Special Operations Command, after all standards are standards. Where I think this is important is deciding if Shrek is more fact than fiction. In reality, there is his story, which is a direct source. Then there is a book, which is a direct source. Then there is Brent, which is a secondhand source. So if the record is so important for people speaking through Brent, but they don't want to risk being able to participate in Delta post-career, I understand. But what it boils down to is a choice. Whether the audience's and public's perception of Delta is more important versus their relationship with the unit by following their expectations. So bottom line, we have to go with the source material and the first-hand sources which are on John's side. Overall, Antihero's done a very good job in the past on their Stolen Valor investigations, but this one felt less professional, more personal. For example, Brent's summary of Shrek.
This is normally the part that I gave to Rob and Tim, and I was like, hey, you can, come clean. You can, everyone loves America still loves a redemption story. It's not over. I'm not even offering John that. You don't. I think you just need to detach from social media. I think you need to quit training people and telling them, all these amazing things that you've done and all this information you have to share. I think you need to get off podcasts, and I think you need to stop embarrassing the unit and stop embarrassing the United States military, and just go do an actual Singleton mission and go get right with yourself.
Brent offered Tim a much more civil breakdown of his discrepancies and gave him the chance to explain himself, but didn't extend that to John.
Admit to every lie. You want to come on here and say, hey, I'm sorry. Almost everything in this book is a lie, and I want a clean slate. I'm not here to destroy anyone. You can absolutely, this can be a redemption story. This absolutely can. Come on the podcast. We'll hug it out. Come clean with the American people and start new.
Is it because they're both special forces in Delta? Tim's accusations are way worse than John's. The grievances with John's are about exaggerating stories and fake kills. Tim lied about dead fellow soldiers and Valor awards. So I think the bias is why this narrative hasn't been well received. But the personal attacks are a good example of this bias.
Several people lamented about how out of shape John was. I know this is funny, but to be the greatest warfighter of our generation, you should probably be in better shape. I don't know if he's completely sober during this episode, but you can only be one of two places. You're either on security or you're clearing buildings and you're part of the assault.
That's what I was just thinking.
But no, he's the greatest warfighter of our generation. He can do both at the same time. He can hold the Mongolian horde off and clear outhouses and clear rooms with water buffalo in.
Yes, the water buffalo story seemed wild, but guess what? The book actually backs that up. The home was typical of a middle-income Afghan farmer, and through our NVGs, we saw chickens scooting calmly across a dirt yard, several goats that were frozen in confusion about the intruders, and a big donkey that stood dead still as we were trying to hide in its presence. Charlie team silently entered the front door of the main residence without anyone becoming the wiser. But just inside the door stood a very large water buffalo that knew these specters did not belong there. The big animal spooked and made a beeline to the front door, and the bighorns nearly impaled a Delta operator. Also, the supposed discrepancy of the security versus breaching point is addressed in the book. The incessant wailing and screaming of 25 to 30 women and children in the small group of building woke up the neighbors. We didn't expect so many women and kids. They outnumbered us. We collapsed our northern security team to help calming and controlling them. From the south came the distinct rattle of AK-47, but no shots landed near us. The last point I think needs to be covered is the timing of Antihero and Valhalla's videos.
We'll probably get it in the comment section too. I hope this was by design, that Valhalla was going to take away his credibility by showing what kind of man he was, and by showing that he was an absolute liar at the end of his career. He's not a Green Beret. He's not a sergeant major. Again, the things he did at the end of his career, and then taking no responsibility for it, lying, acting like it never happened, and then people continue to go and defend him and be like, well, he was such a war hero. Like, we broke him. You think he's still a war hero? Do you? You think he's a war hero? Or you think he's just an a-hole?
So I don't know if Brent was trying to say it was or wasn't by design. Again, I agree with Brent, those assault charges are hellacious. But maybe they were concerned the audience would forgive him, and they want to put the nail in his coffin by discrediting his military service. But I still think Tim should have gotten it just as bad for his lies about dead team members or throwing grenades where they didn't belong. But unfortunately, Brandon's been clear in the past that the personal stuff doesn't fit his criteria for coverage.
You guys aren't going to like this answer, but it's not because that I'm friendly with DJ. That is not the answer. Why? Because the truth matters. We've been very adamant about that. The things that you guys don't like about GBRS and DJ are on a personal level, and things that happen in his personal life, and that's our problem with people is stolen valor, and using stolen valor and making lies that didn't happen off money. We've been really adamant about what our standard is.
Yeah. I think Brent's dislike for John was planned from him refusing to be involved in exposing Tim Kennedy.
Rick, have you talked to John McPhee about Tim's time in the CIF?
I'm not his biggest fan, but that doesn't mean a lot of things. Things that he said. I keep a lot of things generally, that are done. What's the word I'm looking for? At a personal level. But I'll tell you this. Because what rubs you the wrong way about him? Oh, well, for instance, I sent him the link to the podcast, and I just said, careful who you hitch your wagon to. And he responded back, still couldn't care less, FYI. So that tells me a lot that I need to know about him.
I get his frustration. Everyone, including myself, was frustrated that John didn't speak about his experiences with Tim. But again, I have to be objective, and John doesn't seem to care about internet controversy.
So yeah, people try to drag me into internet all the time. Like, well, if you just would comment, other people would shut up. I'm not commenting. I don't give a that other people talk. The internet's full of village idiots. You know what I mean? They all have a voice, and they're the loudest ones on the internet. It's your fault for even looking.
Another thing I found interesting is that Brent had supposedly known or suspected John had lied and knew he had been fired since Brent said he talked to John's teammates back before June 5th, 2025.
But I've already talked to the guys. I already know. Thank you, Jamie, for saying that. Is that Shrek is not a well-liked guy at the unit. He was fired for a reason. And he can go on the Shawn Ryan show and say, oh, well, the reason they fired me is because the unit doesn't like a messy divorce. That's not true. That's not the reason you were fired.
The last point I want to touch on is Brent's frustration of the audience eating up John's stories.
Get out of here. And you guys are eating this up. You guys, now that I'm sure once you hear it now, you're like, oh, that kind of makes a lot of sense. People are listening to this guy and just eating it up and be like, this is a warrior.
I agree. John's stories sound very far-fetched. And the thought of traveling around Afghanistan alone is terrifying. When Brent broke it down, it was very clarifying to think how strange this was logistically. Yeah, taking buses alone and finding a house in the US and not being able to speak the language or having a smartphone is an impossible task. After watching Antihero, they sold me on condemning John, but then finding more in-depth clips of him explaining the culture made me think about it even more. It's not like Afghanistan is super developed like Los Angeles with endless towns. Afghanistan is mostly rural cities that are few and far between, with a couple houses each, a different culture, and a different infrastructure. And to think the most elite soldiers in the world had endless amounts of surveillance and planning, they probably can make this ridiculous mission happen. But at the end of the day, the only other direct source that has shared specifics is Tom Greer, so even though I feel John has exaggerated his Singleton Mission in Afghanistan, it seems to be more fact than fiction. John Shrek McPhee has been telling his stories for over a decade, and the stories themselves for the most part have been consistent. So one has to wonder, what was the catalyst for people to decide to call him out? I have 3 theories what the catalysts were. John would appear on the Megyn Kelly show towards the end of May of this year. He would talk about seeing Blackhawks in Tora Bora during the ceasefire and infer that some government agency evacuated Osama bin Laden in order to continue the war on terrorism.
Helicopters flew over the battlefield, which I still to this day don't know who they were.
Oh, you think he was escaping?
I look at it this way. If the first 10 days of the war, 10 guys kill bin Laden, where's the war on terror at?
Oh, this is interesting.
The checkbook would have never got opened.
I don't believe that happened. The reason being, I couldn't find any other times he shared that story, and I feel like Tom would have written about it in his book, since he was critical of the orders to stand down during the ceasefire by the Pentagon. So maybe he's projecting, but that story seems very far-fetched. Going back to Jamie Caldwell, as far as I can tell, he's the only other operator that has been in the Battle of Tora Bora that has said anything besides John and Tom from the book.
Shrek has, completely gone off the radar. Yeah. If anyone wants me to talk about Shrek has, completely gone off the radar. He's on whatever will get him famous. That's all I know. Yeah. He's exaggerating completely.
This is from a video he did with Matt Pranka. The original video has been taken down, and this is the best clip I can find. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, Jamie didn't call any specifics but acknowledges that Shrek is exaggerating what happened. So it sucks that Jamie is the only one in the spotlight that can shed light on all this. But unless someone else comes forward or Jamie shares more, we are at a standstill. But I do think Jamie making this comment combined with the Megyn Kelly show is what initiated the backlash for John. Lastly, John's comments about the lone survivor story, Chris Kyle, or talking about the Mogadishu events, and him almost using it as a way to bolster himself over other veterans and operators, made this a long time coming.
I never look, the lone survivor, I never understood the full story because I went out alone all the time. That shit didn't happen to me, motherfucking 7 Taliban on my ass. You want to see 7 fucking bodies super quick? You know what I'm saying? Bring them boys up here, So I never really understood some of these other stories because I had such a different experience. I can't fathom if I was with 5, the times I was with 5 guys, how many people, I was with 3 guys, how many people we killed in the Battle of Tora Bora? Fucking hundreds. I just stopped counting on my first day.
I think he's a hero. I applaud him for his service. I feel sorry for his wife and kids, My heart goes out to him, but, the story's ripe with inaccuracy, and I don't think Hollywood made it better.
Do you worry that the average American might see the movie as more of a documentary than entertainment?
Of course they will. It's a look into stuff that they don't get to look into. And because there's a real guy behind it, they're going to see it as this is all truth and fact.
Whereas when you watched it,
it's crap.
One of the things that guys don't talk about is, the Mogadishu guys, the Black Hawk Downs. You know how many of those we did? Hundreds, you know what I mean? In Mogadishu, it was 1 Black Hawk Down, and I'm not taking away from any of those guys. I know most of them. I love every one of them. But you know how many hot HLs, hey, helicopter got shot down in Yusufia. We're going in to find the guys who shot the helicopter down to kill them. Oh, by the way, we're landing where they just shot down a helicopter. whose fucking idea is this? Like, there comes a time where I'm like, I achieved everything I wanted to achieve, and I was ready to move on.
I really don't like these comments. I'm sure the rest of the veteran community, especially the soft community, don't look too kindly on his comments either. I know there will be comments that it looks like I'm blindly defending Shrek in this video, but we have to be consistent. One thing that I've noticed with the Tim and John stories is creators like Shawn Ryan getting a pass for not calling them out.
No terp, no nothing. No, just shut up. Hold on. No terp, no nothing? Yeah, Sean's over here not buying it. He's like, it ain't making sense to... Sean's not dumb. Yeah. Sean's a smart guy. But, you know, when you have someone on your show, that's just... I mean, and I don't expect Shawn to stop an interview to a Delta Force guy and be like, hold on, before we go forward... Are you lying to me? I don't expect that. Like...
If we can understand why it would be inappropriate for Shawn to call his guest during an interview, we should also understand that the guest like John not correcting his intro on Sergeant Major is the same argument. Shawn Ryan is the 15th largest podcaster in the United States and the largest military creator on YouTube. So his team should be doing some proactive quality control when playing their content to their audience. Also on the topic of people deleting videos during times of criticism. I get it's embarrassing and you don't want to be involved in social media drama. But for channels to delete your content to either shield yourself or others from controversy and accountability, I interpret it as hiding important evidence for the public court to make their decision. As a creator, I get it. I have videos on my channel that I'm embarrassed of that I want to delete. But for transparency and consistency towards my audience, I don't. And to the fair weather creators that love to cover the drama and use the veteran community for quick clicks, then abandon them and make a 180 when there's a touch of criticism, we all see through you. There is a lot to unpack with this story. There are even more points to cover, like the detainee abuse or the reason he was fired from being a sergeant major. But for the sake of time and staying with the theme of stolen valor, I think these are the most important points. Do I think John is exaggerated and lied about aspects of his service? Yes. Do I think his overall service is more fact with a bad attitude than fiction? Ultimately, yes. Going over what we have available and what's public and being as unbiased as I can, I think his core perception of his military service is more rooted in reality than lies. It is unfortunate to see Antihero disband. Now, do I think Brent and Nate cover this more from an emotional lens? Yes. But I understand why. And I also understand that there might be things they know that they can't share that's eating at them. But I'm still Team Brent for Sheriff and look forward to his new podcast. Sorry this video took so long to make. When the controversies came out, I just went on vacation. And then obviously I have a career, got sick, had jury duty. So it did take a little longer than I wanted to. Of course, I wanted to make sure I read the book to get all the information I possibly could. But please leave a comment below. Share your thoughts on what you think about this whole situation. Don't forget to subscribe. Please like the video. Remember, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Till next time.